And now we are going to start with our topic for today, which is essentially how do you take a finished manuscript and turn it into a professionally distributed audiobook? First, before we go into the details, let's look at the bigger pictures. Many people think that creating an audiobook just means recording someone who is reading a book aloud. In reality, this workflow, the audiobook publishing, has specific structured workflow and specific requirements, much like publishing an ebook or a print book, and each step builds on the previous one. First thing that I want to bring up, and again, this might not be news to you, especially if you're joining regularly. Audiobooks are not as a channel, but as a format, they're growing immensely. Obviously, there is always room to grow for all the formats, but when you look at the growth data across the different formats, audio is moving upwards the fastest. That is worth noting. So even if you're not publishing audiobooks right now, this is something that you might consider at some point in the future. So what are we going to do? So what is the first step? What are the steps? What needs to be done? So the first step, obviously, is your manuscript. The first thing you have to have is a completed, polished manuscript. If your book still needs some editing, proofreading, anything, please make sure you do it before you move forward with the audiobook. Because once you start recording narration, every typo, every awkward sentence or inconsistency becomes much more noticeable. It's very important to correct these issues prior to recording. So if you make the updates after that, you will have to re-record, and that can be expensive and time-consuming. A very important topic is narration. So we are going to be discussing all of these into detail during the next hour. But I just want to touch base on the different topics that we're going to be mentioning today. So when it comes to narration, you have several options. You can narrate the book yourself. I would strongly advise against that unless you have experience. If you have experience, it's different. You can hire a professional narrator, or you can use AI narration. So if that fits your publishing goal. AI narration is growing incredibly, and we are going to, again, touch base on that as well. Each of these options has its own advantages, its different costs, and different considerations. So once this has been recorded, so every audiobook needs to be edited, and it needs to be edited very carefully and very precisely to remove any potential mistakes, background noise, long pauses, mouse clicks, inconsistent volume levels. It's very important to ensure that the sound is clean and consistent from the first chapter till the end. Then we move to the metadata. We had a whole webinar that was focusing on metadata, and we have mentioned it in other webinars since, and I cannot emphasize enough how important the metadata is. It includes your title, subtitle, author name, book description, narrator, so these are audios, categories, keywords, and other information that retailers use to display and recommend your audiobook. Why it's very, apart from the fact that you want to make sure that your book is polished from day one, it is very important because metadata allows for your book, audio or otherwise, to be discovered. So then there is, of course, the QA, QC, quality control. Before you upload, you absolutely need to make sure that you review everything carefully. So we are, again, going to touch base on the details, but it's very important because it can just taking the time to go over the finished product one last time can save you a lot of time in back and forth with the book review with different stores. And then we go to the distribution. Once everything is ready, everything is uploaded, your book is being delivered to the retailers and libraries that you select. So each of them is going to perform their own review before making the title available to listeners. Again, we'll touch base on the details in a little while. We can go into more of the details. So we are going to start with production. Again, one more thing that is very important to note is what you need to have ready before you start uploading. We are going to touch base on the production shortly before this. So I have mentioned that there are three primary ways for you to create an audiobook: to record, not create. Creation is a larger process. So you have the option to record yourself. This might, and I would like to emphasize the word might here, work if you're comfortable. If your audience expects your own voice, a lot of authors narrate their own books because their readers expect them to, or if your budget is limited. However, I want to make sure that this is actually much harder than most people expect if this is something that you haven't had experience with before, because it's even experienced public speakers often need coaching. It's an option. If this is something you opt for, make sure that you know what you're doing, or if you don't know, that you know someone who can help you get to that. So your option 2 is to hire a professional narrator. And this remains the industry standard and something that we do recommend. So in this case, you're looking at a polished delivery, professional facing. Editing is included in many packages. That really depends on the narrator you're going for. And listeners generally trust experienced narrators. And I know from personal experience that quite a bit of listeners get attached to narrators and will look into the books that specific narrators have actually done, even without knowing much about the book. So it's worth noting. Again, on the other side, the problem, what you want to be mindful of is the cost. They usually charge per finished hour, and it's 10 hours of finished audio. If we say that an audiobook can typically be around 10 hours, can be significantly longer, significantly shorter, but let's say 10 hours, because it's a nice round number, of the finished audio can require 30 to 50 hours of actual production. So there are pros and cons for each of these. This brings us to the AI narration, which has exploded recently, and that's something you're all familiar with. AI voices have improved quite a bit in the previous period. And depending on your book, depending on your budget, AI narration can provide an affordable alternative. There are things that you want to make sure that you keep in mind. So you always want to review the store policies on the AI narration. For most stores, it is not a deal breaker, although some have specific conditions. I'll get back to that. You want to make sure that narration sounds natural. There are voices and voices, different softwares, different programs. Some of them are really good. Some of them sound very artificial, and it can be, for some readers, that's a deal breaker. And obviously, you want to make sure you proof listen carefully. Obviously, technology does save money, but you want to make sure that you are on the top of the quality control. So it's very important, whatever you go for, the quality is very important. So the quality of the recording, the quality of the editing. So it is something that you definitely want to keep in mind. Once you have your audiobook, and before you can distribute it, it needs to meet a set of technical requirements. We are going to touch base on the specifics, so on specific technical requirements for the files that you need. And I just want to emphasize that these standards are not here to make everyone's life difficult. They're there to ensure that every listener gets a high quality experience. And that needs to be the case across different platforms. So, regardless of the platform that is used, it is very important that your book comes across in the same way. Good news is that most technical problems can be easily avoided if you know what the requirements are. So we are going to touch base on those. Again, you can get the specifics from our support team. You will be receiving the recording as well, so you will be able to review. Before we get into that, or rather before we go into the specifics of the files that you need to update, before you start, there is a list of things that you want to have. So you want to have a complete, fully finished audiobook, one audio file per chapter. You need a cover that meets the required size and quality specifications. We'll go to that in a second. You need to have a complete metadata. So the titles, subtitles, etc. You may or choose not to have an ISBN, depending on the stores that you're looking to hit. Again, I will elaborate in a little while on that. You want to make sure that you have a table of contents that matches your audio files and that you have the necessary publishing rights that make sure that you have a permission to distribute the content. So you will not always be asked to provide this. So you will not always be asked to provide it, but in case you do, it is expected that you can provide them in order to proceed. So now we are going to start with the cover image that I have mentioned. So as I said, out of these, there things you need to have: content files, so audio, cover image. So we are going to start with the cover image or the specifications for your cover image. Let me just see if there are any questions, because I have been speaking for about 15 minutes and I don't want to ignore any questions. So we have a question: why can't we create audiobook with Google Play in Romania? This is down to Google Play, because they have specific territory rules. This is not something that is in any way connected with PublishDrive. It is down to their business decision. So I don't have the details. I wonder what difference would make to have an ISBN number for my audiobook. We are going to get to that in a second. So when we get to the metadata, we will be talking about ISBNs. Essentially, you can publish your audiobook without. In that case, it's automatically going to be assigned an identification number or PublishDrive unique identifier. But some stores require ISBNs. So that is the main difference. But we'll get to the details. Hello, will we receive a recording? I keep getting a spinning wheel. Yes, recording is going to be sent out to everyone who subscribed, or rather who wanted to join the webinar. Can I reuse my book's cover image? Okay, I'm going to need more details. So you can either leave them in the comment or you can check with our support team. Okay, so going back to cover image requirements. So you want to make sure ahead of time that you have the correct format. So it needs to be a JPEG with RGB color scheme. It needs to be square, so equal width and height. The minimum resolution is 1400 by 1400 pixels. It needs to be at least 72 dpi. Title and author's name must appear on the cover. and the cover, or rather the information that are on the cover, have to match the metadata precisely. Make sure you include no borders. You cannot reference physical media, so a DVD or a physical book. The cover image must not be blurry or pixelated. Scanned images are not acceptable. Basically, you can basically just make sure you follow these rules, and you're not going to encounter any issues with the cover requirements. When it comes to the files, okay, let me just see. I have lost sound for several minutes. Still nothing after reloading. I'm very sorry about that. I have a stable connection, so if it doesn't work on your end properly, you will still receive the recording of the webinar by end of day today. When it comes to the content file, again, there is a number of criteria that need to be met. So it has to be an MP3 or M4B file. It needs to be recorded in stereo. It needs to have specific constant bit rate, 192 KB per second or higher. All files have to have the same bit rate or sample rate. It needs to be high quality. Each file has to include complete chapter or chapters. Each file needs to have 0.5 to 1 second pause at the beginning and 1 to 5 seconds or room tone at the end. Individual files shouldn't be longer than 78 minutes, and opening and closing chapters need to include title, authors, narrators, and optionally, this is up to you, publisher and copyright detail. So there is a list of requirements that you just want to make sure are followed when you create your file. It's also important that you ensure that in the production, or rather post-production, the following sounds are removed. So you want to make sure that mouth noise, vocal artifacts are removed. Clicks and pops at the start or end of a file, that happens quite often. Extended periods of audio silence within a file, or excessive background noise. When it comes to specific stores, or rather the store's requirements, most stores require that chapters are divided distinctly. So each chapter should be a separate audio file. You want to make sure that the start and end of each audio file corresponds directly with the beginning or the end of the chapter in the text. You want to make sure that each audio file is labeled or titled to reflect that chapter number or the title. Chapter numbers or titles are expected to be recited at the beginning of the file. And also individual chapters shouldn't exceed 78 minutes. Even if they are longer than this, not all audiobooks, distributors of audiobooks have this limit. Even if it surpasses this length limit, audiobook is going to be accepted, is going to be distributed, but we won't be able to send it to all stores. We are just going to, so I already mentioned that when naming the content file, you want to make sure that you include the metadata, or the authors, narrators, publisher, and copyright. You want to name them opening and closing. You want to place the opening file first and the closing one last. Now, I mentioned AI narration, and I'm certain that it is a topic that many are interested in. AI narration can be used, but it needs to be indicated in the narrator field or the book description in the metadata. This is because of the store policies. Some stores do allow AI narration, most of them actually do, but it needs to be marked as such. For some, so specifically Audible and In Audio, formerly Find a Way, they have different rules. When it comes to Audible, so they have two distinct scenarios. Option one, if you create an audiobook yourself using 11 Labs or another AI voice and upload it through ACX, so they won't accept externally AI narrated audiobooks. If, however, you're working directly with Audible as a participating publisher, they're rolling out their own AI narration technology through selected publishing partnerships. Publishers who are working with them this way can choose an AI voice that is provided by Audible itself. It's not available to everyone. And it's worth noting that this is changing very fast. I would, when you're working on publishing or when you're planning your distribution, I would make sure that you check the requirements ahead of time. So for In Audio, they do accept AI narrated audiobooks, but AI narration must come from an approved provider. And as of now, that includes Google Play Books, 11 Labs, and Spoken Press. You would need to upload the required package generated by those providers, and the audiobook needs to be disclosed as AI narrated. Again, not every retailer in their distribution network will accept AI narrated titles, so it does depend on the destination retailer. So there is a lot of details. Things are changing very quickly. So I would encourage you that when you're planning the distribution, when you're developing your strategy, I would definitely recommend that you check ahead of time where everyone is standing, because it's not something that it's very dynamic. Which brings us to the metadata. Metadata is going to help your readers discover your book and help you put the audiobook in front of your readers, or help it get in front of your readers. So there are a lot of fields. We're not going to focus on all, depending on the time, we shall see. But I'm going to focus more on the most important ones. Obviously, we're going to start with the title and the subtitle. The title field should have only the actual title of your book as it appears on your book cover. It has to match exactly. Subtitle, if you have it, great. If you don't have it, that's fine. You can just leave the field empty. It is completely up to you. You do want to make sure that you don't include references to other titles or authors, unauthorized reference to a trademark term, a reference to sale rank, keywords, or unnecessary repetitive terms or phrases. It has to match exactly the cover image. And also in the metadata, the title and subtitle, where applicable, they need to be written in the same language and using the same script as the one on the cover. Also, they have to match the language that you have selected as primary in the metadata. So those are obviously important. You would need to follow the capitalization rules of the language the book is written in. You don't have to include a subtitle. It is completely up to whether you have it or not, but you want to make sure that grammar capitalization is followed for the language in question. We received a question too about the ISBN. So I mentioned that for most, the ISBN is not required. So what happens? Most of our store partners can accept audiobooks with our own identifier. It starts with 661. You have probably seen it. PublishDrive unique identifier the number is going to be assigned to your audiobook when it passes the book review process and the book is accepted for publication. If you want to publish your book without the ISBN, you will be asked. So there is a question when you're filling out the metadata details, do you want to add an ISBN to this book? You can say no, you can say yes. If you click yes, you will be prompted to add the ISBN. So why it's important? Some stores only accept audiobooks with the N, one of them being Spotify, Gardeners, and Pick. So if you do not enter an official ISBN, it won't be delivered to those stores. If you want to publish your audiobook to the stores that require ISBNs, you need to buy an official ISBN. It can generally be obtained from your local ISBN agency. There are several vendors online, and they're all safe to use. PublishDrive does not provide ISBNs, primarily because the author or the original owner of the rights keeps all the copyright for all the books that are published through PublishDrive. So we don't own the copyright to your titles at any point. So that is, and giving out ISBNs could affect that. So it's just something that we have decided not to do. Also, one more thing that I would like to emphasize, because we have had challenges, some of the clients have had challenges in the past. Once you publish your book, you can edit. You can edit everything, all the metadata, except the ISBN. Why? Because it's the main identifier of the book. So changing it would cause a mess in the distribution channel. If you enter a wrong ISBN, it happens, it's not the end of the world, but you would need to withdraw the book and then upload it again with the correct ISBN. So it just cannot, it's something that the entire publishing system, it's not PublishDrive specifically, but the entire ecosystem prevents from happening. If there is a wrong ISBN, the book has to be withdrawn and then published again with the correct ISBN. You will also be asked to add the contributors, authors, illustrators, narrators, very important because we're talking about editors, all kinds of contributors depending on obviously the book. So it's important to know if you have more than one authors, all of them need to be listed in authors field, not a single field, separate individual fields for authors, but they would all be added as authors, also as editors if they're multiple, translator also as well. So if you have used the AI in the creation of your book, you would note it in the creators field depending on how it was used. So again, AI narration can be used, but it must be indicated in by field in the metadata. I have already touched base on that, which stores allow it, which stores don't, and what the requirements are. So generally, you want to make sure that the authors, narrators, contributors are listed properly and fully, and their names, if we're talking about authors, in the metadata have to match the names that are shown on the cover. Obviously, if your book is part of the series, you would enter the name of the series in the appropriate field. If not, it's just something that you're going to skip. Now, that brings us to the description. And description, first of all, needs to be written in the same language as the primary language selected in the metadata. Also, one thing that you want to, I know it can sound redundant, but please make sure to add the correct description if you're uploading several books at the same time. It happens sometimes that when working on multiple titles, there is a mismatch. And obviously, it's important that it accurately describes the book. So a couple of things that we would recommend that you avoid is You don't want to make the description the biography of the author. Don't just include a quote from a book without further description and additional information. There is a minimum length of description, and it's there for a reason. So typically we would recommend around 2-3 paragraphs. It's not, there is at least I don't think there is like a limitation in terms if you want to have a longer description, but it's usually not something that a lot of users are going to read. If it's too long, they're not going to read the whole thing. But typically, we recommend several paragraphs, but avoid descriptions that are too short because they are not going to get to your audience. You also want to make sure that it is properly formatted and that it's not all in bold or italic. Again, sentence case and grammar go without saying. When it comes to audio length, so I have mentioned the 78-minute, so they have limitations, but when it comes to the entire book, there is no final length of the piece of work specific. You will be asked to input the length of the files, to define the language, secondary language, if it's applicable. And that brings us to the categories. You want to make sure, like I said, we did have a whole webinar talking about categories, about keywords, about metadata in general. When it comes to categories, make sure that they actually match the book, because they can really help the readers discover your book. You can select up to 3, and you don't have to do 3, but it's typically it's 3. And there are some common errors that happen quite a bit. So obviously selecting different categories, using both fiction and nonfiction categories together for the same book. There might be a very few exceptions for this, but the general rule, either fiction or nonfiction, depending on the book itself. You want to make sure that your book doesn't have clashing categories. Also, we often see incorrectly selected genre like drama or comic books. So you want to make sure that the when you're selecting a subcategory, main category needs to be applicable to your book as well. So I know that some of these should be self-explanatory, but I just wanted to bring out the details that you might want to be mindful. So like I said, you don't have to use all 3 slots, but using the maximum number is going to help you gain visibility. It's absolutely something that you want to make sure that it is as precise as can be for your title, because that is going to make sure that you're putting your book in front of the clients who are interested in that specifically. You will be asked if there is adult content. That is just typical. If there is, you will select it. If not, it's fine. Yeah, but you will be prompted to add it. Now, you will also be asked about the target audience. Generally, you select the audience that roughly fits who you primarily want to reach with your book. A lot of books, majority of books actually, will fall under a general selected as a target audience. There are going to be some children books, academic publications, etc. But generally, if there is nothing specific, go with general. If unsure, ask us. It's going to save you time. Which brings us to the keywords. And keywords by default, first of all, you can enter 7. Again, you don't have to add 7, but if applicable, to maximize your visibility, at least a few, I would recommend to do all of them, to use all the 7 slots that you have. Also, when you start to type them in, you will only see 3 slots. As you fill them out, the additional ones show up. You do have a total of seven slots for this. What's important to note, no store names, no reference to price, no reference to other authors, books by other authors, best-selling, advertisements, description instead of keywords. So go with what is your audience going to type in to look for your book. That is always a good starting point when creating your keywords. You will also be asked about the publication date as well. If it's in the past, it's fine. If it's upcoming, you're just going to add that. So once you fill out your metadata, and it can be daunting first time you're doing it, you are going to proceed to distribution. Before we do, metadata should improve your discoverability. And that is something that you need to be mindful of when you are planning the metadata for your upcoming books. Before I move, okay, wow, 45 minutes. Where has the time gone? Let me see if there is another question. Okay, so Ana Maria asked if she can reuse her book cover image. If you can please elaborate on that, because if you have used it for a currently published book, you want to use it again. I just want to make sure I understand what the specific ask is. Jonathan is asking, does PublishDrive provide audiobook services? If you mean a production of audiobooks, no, just the distribution. So we have a question from Martha. If I have a Kindle on Amazon, how can I get an audiobook from it? So you would need to have whether it's a print book or ebook, you would need to have files, your audiobook recorded. We discussed at the very beginning, the very introduction of the first part of the webinar. So basically record the files record the audio files, make sure that they follow a specific set of rules, make sure that you have the correct cover, that you have the correct introduction, and then you can proceed to distribute it through different channels of your choice. Should the metadata show the publication date of the audiobook or the publication date of the printed book, since this is specifically pertaining to the audiobook? Okay, so moving on to the distribution channels. So if you are distributing through PublishDrive, you know that we distribute through a number of different channels. And you know that this means that, first of all, you can manage all your metadata in a single place, and it's going to be reflected across the different channels. You only upload your book once. You track royalties in our platform. That you update everything in a single place. So what I would just want to mention is that once your book is uploaded, your book is going to undergo the book review process. Once it clears the book review, it is being sent to each individual store or the distribution channel. Each of them have their own book review process, and their review timelines might differ. They actually do differ. You can find individual ones, or you can ask about the individual ones. That it's not going to be expected for the book to be published on the same day on different stores, because it's going to depend on their systems, which may be very close in terms of book review timelines or quite different. Generally, when distributing, you are going to choose the retailers where you want to go. You can, when it comes to audiobooks, generally split them into 3 groups, like the major audiobook retailers, where customers buy their audiobooks individually. The most well-known being Apple Books, Google Play Books, Audible, Kobo. Yeah, then subscriptions and streaming services. So that's Spotify, Storytel, Everand, Bookmate, and the rest. And library platforms. So basically, the services that license audiobooks to public libraries, school libraries, etc., like Libby, Hoopla, Biblioteca, and others. So what you want to do specifically and which retailers you want to use, that is completely up to you. But I always recommend the wide distribution. So going to as many as possible at the same time. So it changes nothing in the cost. And you are increasing your reach with some specifically. You're increasing your discoverability, which is very important. And you are avoiding a single marketplace. You're present in different marketplaces. The point is, the way I see it, and obviously this is something you can always choose for yourself. So you want to make sure that you reach listeners wherever they go for content. So some of them are buying, some of them are streaming, some of them are borrowing from local libraries through the services that provide content to local libraries. So you want to make sure that your book is where the consumers are. So it's my recommendation. Obviously, this is something that you are going to select for yourself. But I would always recommend with. There are some common mistakes that we get quite often, and that can cause back and forth during the book review process, and that obviously cause frustration across the board. So you want to make sure that your audio is of good quality. It's important for the audio to be high quality. So you want to make sure that you have edited out, or you have had the following edited out. So the background noise, the inconsistent volume, unedited recordings. It makes for bad experience, and clients are not going to finish, your consumers are not going to go through the entire book. Again, I have mentioned the technical requirements. You want to make sure that you have the information about the technical requirements ahead of time and that you follow them. This is because it saves time for everyone, and not to mention frustration. Metadata. If you're following these regularly, you know that I am overbearing with the metadata. It's very important. Please make sure that it's accurate, to the point. What we most often see for the audiobooks, we see missing narrator, not so much the authors, but narrator. Weak or missing description, incorrect categories, keywords that are not incorrect, but they're too wide, so they're going to bury your book beneath many others. Be very meticulous when it comes to creating your metadata. Cover image. Again, there are specific requirements when it comes to the cover image. Please make sure you follow it, because again, the primary issue is going to be that you will use the time and lose the time, go back and forth with the book review when it's really not necessary. Listen to your file before you upload. That can save you a lot of time. Make sure that you have secured the publishing rights, and that you can provide proof if needed. And don't rush. That again goes hand in hand with the quality control. Don't rush with the submission. Double check your files, double check the metadata. So you can streamline the process. That is definitely something I would very strongly recommend, because these are the issues that we most commonly see, and we want to make sure we help our clients avoid everything that can be avoided. generally, what you want to do with your book, how you want to go about this. You want to make sure that your production method matches your goals and budgets. Also, you want to be mindful of the pluses and minuses of each individual method. So there are going to be benefits, there are going to be drawbacks. You need to choose what works for your specific situation. You want to make sure you follow the specs for the files carefully. I know they can be overwhelming, especially if you're just starting and if you're not very technical. So, but take time to go through that, or even better, someone who understands that better can go through that. Take your time with the metadata. I promise I'm not going to continue about metadata, but it really cannot be emphasized enough. Review each individual file before submission and before publication. It's not just about getting it out there. So obviously you want to publish your book, you want your readers, your listeners to enjoy it, you want them to get something out of the experience. Don't just rush to get the book published. Make sure that experience that you're giving to your listeners is worth it. So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to take a look at the questions now. If the audiobook is prepared by a sound specialized company, should I add the company name as a narrator? There is going to be a specific narrator if there is just a company that was working on it. Yeah, you can do that. You don't have to name an individual. The title, the author is the same. So we're going back to the audiobook and the cover. So I thought, no, if the title and the author are the same, people are going to think it's the same book. No, I would definitely recommend keeping the same style and similar artwork type, but not the same image. Does anyone else have any more questions?